Well, just in the next few hours, we're going to have the President of the Republic of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama, appearing before members of the House to give the state of the nation. We know there is a constitutional requirement that is undertaken almost like an obligation by the President of the Republic every year. And last year, same was given before members of Parliament. Of course, because of the vibrancy of the mass media, always extended to the homes and offices or wherever, or trading places of the ordinary Ghanaian. And so the ordinary Ghanaian is in a position to listen to and also make inputs thereafter following those media reports that would also be relayed on public discourse and also on social media. And I can tell you, after today's delivery, the President's address will be put to the test or will be subjected to a lot more scrutiny. But we also need to do a lot more scrutiny as our own way of previewing or anticipating what the content of the State of the Nation address will be for President John Dramani Mahama. And I'm privileged to have in the studio Dr. Senzu. He is the director for the Bastiat Institute of Ghana. And thanks for joining me this morning. He is also an economist as well. And currently a researcher. How do you classify yourself? You're an academic researcher or a development economist? Or?
You know, more like we are moving to the level of becoming more behavioral economists.
Behavioral economists.
Behavioral economists. And in my works, we focus so much in trying to turn the classical works, because the loophole within the classical economics is ability not to answer certain practical issues, because human beings cannot be predicted on mathematical formula. Sometimes we have to study the behavioral conditions to base on it. So these are more areas, but my more of specialty has been business economist.
Okay, we've gotten you on that. But the Bank of Ghana has been speaking a lot. They've downplayed criticisms that government's borrowing is getting out of hand. And we know that these are one of the things we'll be talking about. There have been concerns that at the rate that government's debt or public debt is mounting, Ghana would be spending unsustainable amount of its tax revenue to pay interest rates and leaving nothing for development projects as far as the annual budget is concerned. So far, figures released by the Central Bank of the Bank of Ghana at its Monetary Policy Committee's news conference that was relayed to the media a couple of days ago puts the local or the total public debt at some 76.1 billion Ghana cedis at the end of 2014, just last year, up from 51.9 billion Ghana cedis at the close of December 2013, a year before. Government spending also amounted to some 23.6% of GDP, and this is slightly above the outlay of some 23.2% of GDP for 2013. And the Bank of Ghana, however, says government has very few options at the moment. So we'll get to have a story on the subject, then we'll come back and continue our discussion on the State of the Nation address to be brought to you on this very channel by the President before Parliament.
The fiscal consolidation is taking place is to control the growth of the debt stock, or even if not the stock, the GDP, debt to GDP ratio, which is really the measure we should be looking at. And I think the first step you need to do in getting there is to reduce your deficit, and that clearly is what was outlined in the budget, where we have a deficit profile from 6.5 this year, 6.5% of GDP this year, to around 3% by the end of 2017. So I think that those are steps that have been taken. The issue of the debt is acknowledged by government, and steps have been taken. There are even debt management strategies that are being looked at, including restructuring some of the debt, so on, to ensure that the servicing will not be too much of a burden. I don't agree that federal borrowing should be suspended, because that would mean that government has to balance its budget. I'm not sure as at this time that is a possibility. I think the issue is reducing the deficit gradually. It may happen later if that we could balance the budget, but we are coming last year. I think the preliminary figure is around more than 9% of GDP. That's not confirmed yet, but it's about more than 9% of GDP. You can't come from 9% of GDP to 0%. There has to be a gradual adjustment. So a 3% adjustment will send you to around 6.5% and then further down. And I think that's the way to go.
Be a part of the news, the breaking news, the developing news, the social news, and what's trending. Get connected, get interactive. Joy News Interactive, weekdays 6:30 p.m. on Joy News.
So we'll have to continue our discussions, and you heard from the central bank governor, Dr. Henry Wampa there. Does it mean that the economy is in dire straits, and should the content necessarily of the State of the Nation addressed by the president only be focusing about the economy, the current challenges we have with energy? And Dr. Senzu is here. Now, as far as we're concerned, I've heard, and I keep quoting this very development economist, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and in his book, The Price of Civilization, he says, following the efforts by the American government to bail out due to the recession, the various companies, and following the collapse of Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac, etc., and the crisis that they had with their mortgage industry, governments have critical roles to play, even in the developing economies. How even more are our economies, which are even more developing than theirs, the more developed ones? What critical role do you think that governments can play if the conditions within their economy is that very bad or in dire straits, so to speak?
Thank you very much. And again, I also greet your listeners this morning.
And thanks for joining us too.
Thank you too. One major focus we have to look on the side of African government is they trying to understand that to empower the economy will stand strongly on the side of the private sector. And they need to put all the conditions that will create that enabling environment for the private sector to be able to thrive. If you look within the African system and our governance, when they are talking about trying to empower private sector by government-private partnership, you realize that they don't even focus on the domestic businesses. They are focusing on rather the external businesses who are not dwelling in the economy. That most of their production and everything and any return that is generated in terms of any financial transactions goes back to a new economy. This is how our people works. But if our government will learn to see how the domestic businesses need to be given the enabling environment, and that is where it comes from the side of economics I practice, more a little bias, that is a libertarian. And I'm not on this platform on the preaching of liberty, because the fight of the libertarian is government should play its role more strategically where they create that enabling environment. They should not be too in to influence the market. They should rather play that role whereby their strategic part rather contribute for the market to work naturally. Because when government make an attempt more like artificializing the market, what will happen is that things decide to turn to work in equilibrium situation. And that is the situation most of the time we see.
We find ourselves. And I believe what you're saying is not only peculiar to Ghana, but the trend in Africa. And talking about the trend in Africa, I was just reading some statistics. And in Tanzania, they had been making inroads, inviting a lot more partnerships from outside. And they call it, as always, FDIs, foreign direct investment. And that's the trend also in the Gambia. And well, with the exception of Zimbabwe, also the same trend as far as we're concerned in Zambia. Kenya also has seen a lot of those inflows as well, by which the East African economy is growing by in excess of some 6%, and they hope that they can grow within the next 5 years, in even at the more faster rate. Now, if you take a look at it, and you see that the total cost of investment are being borne by foreign enterprises, so to speak. Is it not irrational that we want to have a lot more foreign direct investment because we don't have the technology, we don't have the expertise, we have the resources, but then we don't even have the know-how also to turn them around? That makes a lot of sense to me.
On this basis, that is where then we call back into the government. The role government need to play in this particular proposition you have made has to be focused on policy. How do I curve my policy in such a way that such type of foreign investment that are coming will be able to transmit that and possibly have impact on my economy? And that need to be well calculated, because now we are getting to the level that we don't want economies to be more of like classical. We come from the class and we are just following certain formulas. We want it to be more that when you take a particular hypothesis or a model, you subject it to your environment, test it, and then you bring your innovation ideas into it. That comes by building the final policy we are talking about. And that's how we can get that good answer where we are getting. Whereby you are just seeing that because remember, the foreign donors that are coming, they were supported and rooted by a certain economic environment. So when anytime they are investing, remember they also invest by a consideration of political ideologies behind. It is not only just by investing. But I don't know for the past in Africa, whether if how we were brought, we have lived to a certain level where we look as if that we want everything for free. But I want you to know that there is nothing free in the system. When you see anything coming, it comes somehow in a strategy like a free, but at the end of the day, it comes with its own consequences. And that's why our forefathers have that whole system. Every meat you see may have a barley night. Any sweet has bitter behind it. And
the English say there's nothing like free lunch.
Free lunch.
Okay, we'll transcend to Ghana very soon, because our focus is supposed to be on the State of the Nation address. You take the Nigerian economy after rebasing. It's in excess of $500 billion US, has exceeded South Africa. But you take the structure of the South African economy, and you see that the economic level is not necessarily dependent on what happens at the macro level. At the micro level, there's also a lot more being done. That is not the same analysis you can subject the Nigerian economy to, because you have a lot more people at the base, at the micro level, who don't have access to the needed capital, who can't even turn around the needed capital they're given into positive resources or into whatever enterprises that they engage in. That's the difference. It's almost like comparing developing economies to the more developed economies. Now, how do we change that very trend?
If you will be able to change it, we need to then understand, each and every African country need to understand its SME ecosystem. Day back from the time of the developed country, they have known the engine growth. We seems to be trumpeting SMEs are engine of growth, but we lack what we call the implementation format to get it more practicalized to have effect on the economy. Okay, let me tell you this, because I know this for a fact, because I read from the World Bank and also the CIA website. The American economy has 22% of its revenues coming from small and medium scale enterprises. They call it small enterprises. So if they have a very good model like that, why can't we have it? It is not that our people don't have the knowledge, and it is not that they are not aware of the number of research that has been done by various
Dr. Senzu, what's wrong then?
The problem has been about the political ideology and the motive. I had been one of the people who normally do say...
You are saying that we have bad policies?
We have, most of them are bad policies. And the second agenda is, our institution seems to be established to be meant for a particular objective on a paper, but its implementation, there seems to be that gap. And that has to be onion. That is why you saw Obama coming here saying that we don't need a mafia or strongman, but we need a strong institution, because they saw that loopholes. That possible when the institution are strengthened, then possible we can see most of these nice policies, because a lot of papers and academic papers are there, but they look as if it cannot be implemented. And sometimes other scholars may think that it could be there because we don't have that strong institution. That is why we are lacking its implementation on the grounds.
Now, when we come to Ghana, over the last year, and actually since 2013, due to the sort of variables we had from the economic performance from 2012, with high overruns on the budget, and as a result of that, the debt to GDP ratio also increasing. We've had those fallouts subsequently to the last year. The President's State of the Nation address, is it only supposed to be focusing on energy and the state of the economy, because that is the difficulties we're having currently?
I've written a paper on that to question that why do we want to narrow the whole situation of Ghana to look as if that now only power crisis is our major burden?
Well, because that's what's crippling the economy in many respects. Businesses can't work, Dr. Senzu.
Yes, it has a 60% contribution crippling the economy as of now. And Ghana seems to have that character where when one particular thing comes on all pressure is on that, leaving the others. But I'm telling you that 40% will show up when the energy crisis issue is addressed to a